Over the past few months, a series of news stories has been trickling out from Australia, Indonesia, the Philippines, Japan, and Vietnam. Each one looks routine on its own. A defense agreement here, a base upgrade there, a military sale. But when you lay them all on the same table and step back, something starts to take shape. Today, we're not going to draw dramatic conclusions. We're going to place 5 puzzle pieces side by side and let the picture speak for itself. In June 2026, on the sidelines of the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore, the United States, Australia, and the United Kingdom quietly revised the AUKUS submarine plan. Instead of receiving 1 new build and 2 used submarines, Australia will now receive all 3 Virginia-class submarines directly from the U.S. Navy's active fleet. USNI News on paper, that sounds like a procurement adjustment, but read it differently. It's a signal about speed. Australia is rapidly expanding its submarine infrastructure. HMAS Sterling on the west coast is undergoing major upgrades for nuclear-powered vessels, docking, maintenance, reactor safety. Australian submariners are already embedded aboard U.S. boats in training. By 2028, the Royal Australian Navy expects to have a fully qualified crew capable of taking command of a transferred submarine. Army recognition, and from early 2027, a permanent rotational force, U.S. and British submarines, is planned to be based at HMAS Sterling. Global security. This isn't cooperation on paper anymore. Someone is pouring concrete. On April 13, 2026, at the Pentagon, the U.S. and Indonesia formalized a major defense cooperation partnership. Under the agreement, the 2 countries will co-develop sophisticated asymmetric capabilities, pioneer next-generation defense technologies in maritime, subsurface, and autonomous systems domains, and enhance joint special forces training. U.S. Embassy. Now here's the detail worth noting. The announcement came just 1 day after reports emerged that the U.S. is seeking blanket overflight access for military aircraft through Indonesian airspace. And on the same day, Indonesia's president was in Moscow meeting Putin. The diplomat, Indonesia maintains a non-aligned foreign policy. It always has. The agreement was explicitly framed around mutual respect and Indonesia's sovereignty. Neither side is locking the other into a formal alliance. The diplomatic insight. But consider the geography. Indonesia sits astride the Strait of Malacca, the Sunda Strait, the Lombok Strait. The Strait of Malacca alone recorded over 94,000 vessel transits in 2024, approximately half of them bound for China. Patriot Fetch. You don't need a military base in Indonesia, you just need a working relationship with whoever controls those waterways. The Philippines is where the picture gets most concrete. As of 2026, there are 9 EDCA sites across the country, Philippine military bases where U.S. forces may operate on a rotational basis, stretching from Palawan in the west, facing the South China Sea, up to Cagayan Province in the north, directly across the Luzon Strait from Taiwan. Daily Tribune, Congress appropriated an additional $144 million in 2026 to invest in these sites. And more than 500 joint military activities have been approved for 2026, more than 1 per day, the most in the history of the alliance. World Socialist website. This isn't just training. The U.S. has deployed Typhoon mid-range missile systems and, for the first time, NMESIS anti-ship missile launchers to Baden Island in the Batanes, positioned directly across the Luzon Strait, looking toward Taiwan. World Socialist website. U.S. assets, operated by U.S. personnel, positioned at the invitation of the Philippine government as part of a mutual defense framework both sides have steadily expanded. The Philippines isn't a passive ally waiting to be defended, it's becoming a forward position. Japan is undergoing a quiet transformation, and the scale of it deserves attention. Japan unveiled SHIELD, an $875 million coastal defense network that knits together unmanned aerial, surface, land, and undersea vehicles into a single integrated system. The target, operational by March 2028, with initial deployment prioritized toward the southwestern islands, closest to Taiwan. GovConExec. Japan's overall defense budget stands at 9 trillion yen, with 200 billion yen earmarked specifically for drone acquisition by end of 2027. The strategist. And the U.S.-Japan relationship has moved beyond bases and treaties. The 2 countries are now jointly developing AI-enabled autonomous drones under the Samurai Initiative, a research program focused on making unmanned systems safe and interoperable enough for high-stakes joint combat environments. Indo-Pacific Defense Forum. Japan isn't just hosting American forces, it's becoming a co-developer of the technology that will define the next generation of warfare in the Pacific. This is the most subtle piece, which is exactly why it matters. On June 10, 2026, the U.S. State Department approved a $100 million foreign military sale to Vietnam, a sustainment package for C-130 Hercules aircraft, covering engine propellers, components, ground handling equipment, spare parts, software, and technical support. ASD News, here's the thing. Vietnam's Air Force doesn't currently operate C-130s. That's what made analysts take notice. The sustainment package implies Vietnam may be preparing to acquire the aircraft. Janes, to understand why this matters, you need to understand Vietnam's diplomatic posture. Vietnam adheres strictly to a non-alignment policy. Hanoi has always sought to maintain balanced relations with both Washington and Beijing, and that hasn't changed. The Communist Party of Vietnam, regardless of its leadership, will continue to prioritize Vietnam's independence amid great power competition, SCA's Yusof Ishak Institute Center for Strategic and International Studies. So the U.S. isn't expecting Vietnam to pick a side. That's not the goal here. This deal signals something more specific. Washington is moving beyond symbolic diplomacy and beginning to institutionalize genuine military interoperability with Vietnam, on Vietnam's terms, at Vietnam's pace. Defense Security Asia. AC-130 operates on Western standards, Western maintenance, Western logistics. Once that infrastructure is in place, it quietly pulls Vietnam's military capabilities into alignment with U.S. systems, without requiring any political declaration. Sometimes the most significant moves are the ones that don't make headlines. Let's zoom out. Australia is building the long-term infrastructure. Indonesia is opening its airspace and maritime lanes. The Philippines is hosting missiles within striking range of critical waterways. Japan is co-developing the drone technology of the future. And Vietnam is quietly beginning to integrate Western military standards. No single piece is a bombshell. Each one has a reasonable, standalone explanation, but placed together they trace an arc, from the Indian Ocean, through the Straits of Southeast Asia, up through the South China Sea, to the Western Pacific. Whether the situation in the Middle East resolves soon or drags on longer, this trajectory in Asia appears to be accelerating regardless. The pieces are moving into position. The question isn't whether, the question is how fast.